Good evening. The May 19th meeting of the Lower Macungie Township Planning Commission is now called to order. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. We have the April 11th draft minutes before us. All of the Planning Commission members should have received copies of the draft minutes. Are there any changes or corrections to the draft minutes? All right, is there a motion to approve the minutes as drafted?
Make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further comment? All in favor of approving the April 11th meeting, say aye.
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 Aye. The motion is approved by a vote of 3-0. I should note one thing for tonight's meeting. We only have 3 members present. We have a 5-member board, so we do have a quorum. And I think our solicitor was researching the issue of how many votes do we need to pass something tonight? Do we need a majority of the quorum, or do we need a majority of the full planning commission?
Still working on it.
He's still working on that issue. Okay. On to the next agenda item, and that would be the preliminary final subdivision plan for the Cove at Millbrook. And Nate, if you would like to review the planning issues with us.
Sure thing. Just as always, give me a moment to get everything pulled up here. Okay, for those who are watching remotely and for those in the audience, this is the proposed Cove at Millbrook project, which has been on the township's radar and MPC time clock now for over a year. It's 16 new single-family dwelling units. Lot sizes averaging around 1/3 of an acre. However, there are some larger lots that are about 1/2 an acre and one that's at about an acre as well. This is a triangular piece of land on Sauerkraut Lane. It's a residual lot from the originally called Wiener Tract, which was preserved by the township several years ago. Tuscus Homes has presented and offered the plan to the township for consideration. It's a relatively simple infill development plan with an internal loop road, double frontage on several of the lots. There would be a required rear buffer, which is included on the landscaping plan, which I will show shortly. There is an unnamed tributary to the creek here off in the corner. This runs up to the neighborhood to the south and then up through the Lichtenwalner farm, which has also been preserved, I might add, and with the headwaters eventually making their way up into Upper Milford Township. The applicants, in their many months working with the township, we've talked about a couple of issues. First and foremost, the status of the, I don't want to say culvert, it's not a bridge, but the culvert that the unnamed tributary goes through over Sauerkraut Lane. Frontage improvements along Macungie Road. It was determined that in lieu of curbing, sidewalk, and street trees on Macungie Road, an internal macadam path would be constructed that would basically be on the easterly side of this unnamed tributary / creek that would go the length of the property, and that the applicant will also offer a public access easement for future trail and potentially bridge out to Macungie Road if the township were to ever obtain funding for such, either through capital projects or a grant. There's a generous landscaping plan, which just give me a moment, I'll show, but again, it involves a high level amount of naturalization in compliance with DEP standards, as well as with our township design guidelines, which again call for generous landscaping. That includes in the third-party HOA owned areas where there would be some stormwater management and along the path. And again, please just excuse me while I get through there. It's acting a little slow. One thing I would like to point out, because we have received outreach and I will allow the applicants to speak to this in greater detail. It has been noted that there are swales and internal stormwater management for this site. The site does not include a basin. It includes a DEP approved, which has been a style of stormwater management, which has been reviewed by the township engineer, which discharges into the 500-year floodplain in more or less a sheet flow fashion. I'm going to allow the engineers to speak to that in greater detail. But I do want to show Again, we are asking that all the existing tree lines remain protected. And again, further, that there would be substantial landscaping by means of that double frontage buffer along Sauerkraut Lane and throughout the trails, and then, of course, internal street trees. And I don't know why this version is not showing it, but I would not like to waste anybody's time further with that. Again, this has been something that we've been spending a lot of time on over the past several months. And Brian, if you want to talk a little bit more about the stormwater, I think that that would be helpful, given the outreach we've received.
Sure. Yeah, so you guys have been before the planning commission a few times. We have previously reviewed the site layout, utilities, grading, stormwater with this project. Specifically for this, So specific to the stormwater, this site is in a no detention area. Essentially, it's close to the Little Lehigh Creek. So the DEP provides the Act 167, which is guidance for stormwater management. The reason, there's no basins proposed on this property because the site is in a no detention area as determined by that Act 167 report. The reason for that is that if you have a whole watershed area where rain falls down, and as that water comes down and concentrates into our creeks and streams and rivers, you end up with at a time where you get a peak flow. It's almost like a wave traveling down the creek. So the water, if you notice, floods, water rises, and as that wave comes down, it then settles out. The point of no detention is actually to the areas that are closer to the creek is to get that peak, their small peaks to the creek and out of the way so that that small peak doesn't end up coming down the river at the same time as the larger peak. So it actually, no detention actually mitigates some of that potential for flooding in the floodplains, in the 500-year floodplain and the Little Lehigh Creek, which is right downstream or just below this site.
Just to follow up a question on that. So what you're saying is the no detention option that's used in this instance is better because of its location to the existing stream
Yes.
than if you would put a detention basin in.
Yes, and it's actually in the Act 167 report. That's how DEP, this area is specified to be no detention
You can't put a basin
by
even if you wanted.
location.
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that's helpful to note also is we have our township ordinance, we have the Act 167, which we are bound by for the creek, which is reviewed by the LVPC. We have the required NPDES permit, which is through the Lehigh County Conservation District, and that comes down through the Pennsylvania DEP. So we're talking about 4 levels of review for stormwater management here at the local, county, and state level that this has been designed through. So I just think procedurally, that's an important point to note.
And beyond that, I think Nate touched on some of the frontage improvements and walkways. This plan is not showing frontage along all of Sauerkraut Lane, but in discussions, we've agreed to provide full frontage, the walking path along the entire frontage of Sauerkraut Lane, and then as Nate referenced, the walking paths through the community kind of offset the required improvements that would be on Country
McCungy.
Road.
McCungy, you're right. Yeah. And we're going to repair the culvert that's on Sauerkraut.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
So the applicant's doing everything we talked about at the last
Mhm.
meeting, the culvert repairs, the asphalt walkway, and then also the frontage improvements along McCungy Road.
On the entire front.
On Sauerkraut.
I'm sorry, in Sauerkraut.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Nate commented about there's a very dense landscaping. We also, as part of our requested relief, was a partial waiver because we can't put street trees along McCungy, but we're going to work with the planning director to put them elsewhere on the site. So there'll be plenty of trees on the site.
All right, we'll open up for questions or comments from the planning commission members. All right. Questions or comments from the public? Anyone from the public who has a question or comment? Yep, just come up front here to the podium. Make sure you speak into the microphone. Tell us your name
My name is John Ulickney. I've owned my house since 2009. It has been in Lower McConchy Township for over 100 years. I'm very proud of that. It is located at 3101 McConchy Road. And I first need to thank my neighbor George Kane. I greatly appreciate him for informing me about the 14-lot subdivision that borders my property line is going to be built in the back of my house. I'm surprised Lower McConchy Township did not notify me about this. Do I not have a right to know?
We post our agendas on our website. That's all that's really required by state law, and we follow the state law advertising requirements.
Huh.
I'm sorry you didn't know about the project, but the township isn't required to send you a notice about every project.
All right, that's fair enough then, I guess. And then also, I would like to say that I've never had stormwater issues until about 5 or 6 years after I moved into the house. In fact, the previous owners, the Dufresnes, who lived there for over 58 years, disclosed to me that the property only flooded once since they lived there, and that was in 1979. I can certainly say that it's definitely not the case today. Lower McConchy Township has done nothing to make sure the residents of McConchy Road are safe from stormwater runoff, and they only continue to put us in harm's way. My property has gone through extensive damages over the past years from overdeveloped land and the way stormwater runoff is being controlled. Damages to my property include land erosion, landscaping, uprooting of trees, and flooding of my basement. You're not allowed to build on our properties, but it's okay for you to allow subdivisions to be built and use the creek in my backyard to dump stormwater in from them and flood my property. Does that sound right to you?
Well, I think you heard from the engineer that it was thoroughly reviewed for all of the township requirements and the state requirements, and that sending the stormwater to the creek.
I understand that, but as of before this is even being built, I have issues of flooding. Massive flooding. This has nothing to do with what they're
Yeah,
building.
this project is the project that's before us tonight, and it complies with the township regulations.
I'm just
I'm
saying,
sorry
you
you
guys
have
are only gonna
stormwater
make things
problems.
worse by adding another subdivision and dumping more water.
I think the engineers are saying that's not going to be the case.
Then why is my yard flooding at the moment?
You're flooding, your yard's flooding now and the development isn't built, but the development is not going to make the problem worse. I think that's what we're hearing from the engineers.
That's not just a local ordinance, that's required by state law. A development that's proposed in order to obtain the necessary permits cannot have additional water discharge that's greater than what it was before something was built
Absolutely,
there.
I know that.
That's a requirement of the law. So, you know, we rely on our engineers and then also our third parties, which are, you know, the third party agencies, which are the Conservation District and the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, to review this for us to ensure that those calculations are correct. And at the end of the day, we have to rely on that. And we cannot turn down any sort of a proposal that meets the merits of those third party approvals as well as our own ordinances.
Are you aware of the flooding in that area?
Yeah, I'm very well aware of the flooding in that area.
You know how big that creek is, right?
Yes, sir.
It's not very big. Not very big at all. What, 6?
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, just come to the microphone, make sure to speak into the microphone and state your name.
Yes. Hi, my name is Paul Ulickney. I'm the uncle of Jonathan. And, you know, I'm an engineer by trade and I've had some subdivision experience. And he asked me, with the permission of the Planning Commission, to make some comments and go over a presentation. So I guess if you guys are okay with that, I would move forward with that.
I'm actually going to object, depending on what kind of presentation we're being made, since we have outside agencies that will be reviewing the stormwater.
I think his presentation is on stormwater, right?
Yeah, it's just on stormwater. That's what it's all about, is just about stormwater. And it's just more, I think, factual about what the history of the place is and things like that. I don't think there's anything totally out of the ordinary for it, to make sure that you understand what the situation is with those lots and the problems that we have with the lots. And, you know, I think, you know, it just announced, you know, very clearly that, you know, the end game should be to ensure that there's no more water going into the creek than there is now. Okay.
All right, we'll allow your presentation, please. You know, we have a lot of people here tonight. We have a
Yeah.
long
Yeah,
agenda.
it won't be very long.
So
We'll go through it.
let's get to
quickly.
the point of it.
Yep, yep. Nathan, I think you had it to display too. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, to
I
be
have some
clear,
paper
to be
copies.
clear, there's visual documentation
Yeah.
that the gentleman would like to have shown on the screen. And that's up to the planning
Well,
commission about whether.
I'm
or
going
not that
to
can be
again
shown.
renew my objection.
Your objection is noted.
Okay, so,
Let's see the.
all right.
Yeah.
He has
not-
it.
Just
Only
give
about
me a
6
moment.
slides. It's not too much. It's pretty much the same. Just one thing in the interest of time while he's bringing that up. You know, one of the things, I think there was a certified letter sent, but somehow there's a problem where his address got wrong in the records over the last year with the township. It was sent to East Texas Road instead of sent to Macungie Road and wasn't delivered. So, and he has this thing, the post office says this is what you're going to get. But he actually got a copy of it, but never got it because it went to East Texas Road. So while he's bringing it up, I just thought I would get that out of the way in the interest of time. But that's something I think we have to correct in the township records, is that things are sent to his correct address and not the East Texas Road. But that's where I think the letter went originally.
Just ask, this, you're still talking about
Yeah.
3101.
Yes, 3101. Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you want to pass this on to whoever has it, that's just a picture of the thing. If you want to give that to whoever in the township maintains the addresses, that would be helpful, and we can get all that corrected. The next slide that comes up, and I could talk through some of these because some of them are talking points. I just think that where his lot is located on the subdivision map is in that upper left-hand corner. That's just the thing. You wouldn't go to that one there, but you can see the unnamed creek. That's where his house is, where all the flooding goes in that upper left-hand corner in there. And I think everybody's aware this entire thing slopes towards that creek. It doesn't slope anywhere else. It goes through the unnamed creek. So that's where all the water will eventually go. The next one is a picture, and it shows some of the flood damage. And also shows his yard. There's the creek. This was taken from his house. You can see the rain spouting is there. This is actually his house. And you can see the debris after the flood. But if you go to the next one, this is what's typically happening in heavy rains now. I mean, it comes up and you see where his house is. Right now, it comes to within feet and sometimes inches of his house. And it isn't just hurricanes anymore. It's with heavy rains. So, and he does have a side basement entrance and his furnace in the basement and, you know, washer and dryer and those kind of things. So any additional water that comes into this lot is going to go into his basement. It's that close. Then I just wanted to show you that picture and make you aware of that. And we'll go to the next one. Again, I promise to be brief and I will be. This is just downstream. And this, I think, is a historical problem where the unnamed creek dumps into the Little Lehigh. There is a culvert that's a perennial issue and a perennial flooding spot. If debris gets caught in the culvert, and I think the culvert is probably even undersized to start with, but if anything gets caught, the entire intersection there, as you probably were well aware, gets flooded. And again, that flood backs all the way up into his house, or, you know, in pretty darn close to his house. But that's what happens where this unnamed creek goes in. The next one, you know, I think we can go through quickly because, you know, it was just mentioned here earlier that basically the law in, you know, the statute 32 and chapter 24 is that, you know, the water that's coming down the creek now has to be the same after the development is done. So as long as we achieve that goal, then I think, you know, we've accomplished what we hope to accomplish. I'm just going to skip down to the questions on the next one. There's some questions there, and I think we would like to hear, like, where does the stormwater for the new road go? Where does the stormwater from the 16 driveways go, the 16 roofs? And will it, you know, change, and will it adequately protect? And will we achieve that goal of not increasing the amount of water that is going down the creek so that we do incur property damage? So, and the last thing was, you mentioned a number of approvals, and we have a number of them here. Is that, you know, where are we with these approvals? Have they reviewed all of this, all the, you know, the DEP and the Conservation District in Lehigh County? Have they all reviewed this?
It's all in process. The township would recommend an approval contingent on getting the outside agency, which is permitted by the MPC. But PennDOT does not review stormwater.
Well, that was for the culvert. That probably won't be for stormwater, right? So it's in process. Have they approved it yet or is it just in process?
They have not approved it.
Okay, so it's in process. Okay, so it's being reviewed.
We had to work with the planning commission to determine what was going to be additional impervious that would need to be included into the design, which is the proposed trail and then the sidewalk along the frontage.
And,
Let's
you
just
know-
be clear where we are in the process. The township engineer has approved the stormwater design. It's DEP.
We need DEP and we need LVPC approvals.
And
yes.
this is the normal process that you
Yes.
come get conditional approval by the township and then you follow up and get the approval from DEP.
Correct.
I mean, it just, to a layman, it just sounds a little counterintuitive that you cannot retain the water and put it in the creek, but not increase the flow into the creek. You know, it is just logically, how do you dump more water in but not increase the flow? So I don't know. That's just hard to,
Did
Wrap
you
my
hear
head
the
around.
engineer kind of explain that?
I heard him about the wave and that kind of
That
thing.
you
but-
want to get the water in before the peak flow comes through in the stream. I mean, that kind of makes sense.
Okay.
Can I,
Um,
just a little bit?
I think if you're talking about large rivers like the Delaware River or maybe even the Little Lehigh, that time gap of how long it takes for the floodwaters to get there is significant. The Delaware River is days, okay? The Little Lehigh Creek is probably hours. I live on a similar creek, even a larger creek than this unnamed creek. And when it storms, that floodwater happens almost instantaneously. It comes down very, very quickly. So, I mean, I would agree with maybe if there's a long wave and you want to get it out there before the big wave comes, but there is no wave. Within 10 hours, it's down and gone, but it comes up like almost instantaneously. Yeah, it comes up very, very quick. I
Okay.
thank you for, I don't want to, that's just one of the things we wanted to stress, but I know you guys are tight on time and there's other people want to speak, so I just wanted to be as brief as I could.
Thank you. I think Brian, our engineer, wanted to comment.
Go ahead, sure.
The only thing I was going to add is that the picture at Creek Lane
Yes,
is is basically a picture of the Creek Lane Bridge, which is directly parallel to the Little Lehigh Creek there.
Yes.
I've looked at this very closely.
Yeah.
Trust me, we didn't take this lightly.
Yep.
The Little Lehigh flooding, that creek actually flooding, that's over Creek Lane. That water is actually, the photo that you have is a photo of the Little Lehigh Creek floodwaters. Your applicant, when the Little Lehigh. Right. If you look at. All right.
Okay.
All right. So when you go onto FEMA's website, you can go to FEMA, you can look at where all the floodplains are from the Little Lehigh Creek, from Swabia Creek, from the other, from the
Right.
Delaware.
Yeah.
You can look up anywhere.
Yep.
I know, I believe you. And trust me, I do believe you. I'm
The-
not saying I don't.
The entire property is in the 100-year floodplain.
The property, yeah, that is in the floodplain of the Little Lehigh Creek.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because the water that's backing up that from the creek back onto your property.
Yeah.
And that, when that surge comes down the Little Lehigh,
That's what's
less
coming.
water is getting out.
I think what they're saying in the videos, if you look at the videos, which I've looked at, and you look at the debris coming down when it's backed up, the debris is flowing from the Little Creek over and down into the Lehigh.
Mhm.
It's not flowing, the current doesn't come from the creek out. It goes from this unnamed tributary in, and that's where I think, if you look at the thing, it just
Yeah.
intuitively, it looks like it's coming from the Little Creek going in for most part in the videos. Okay,
I understand.
thank you for your,
Attorney Durso, I don't know if you or I'm assuming this is the engineer on the project.
This is Phil,
I'm
yeah.
I'm an engineer. I don't know if that makes me more or less dangerous.
Yeah.
If you have any comments,
Sure,
Uh,
Phil.
Sure. Our engineer of record couldn't be here tonight. We actually have a conflict and on my way to another meeting after this. So we, as has been summarized so far, we don't make the release rate rules. Those are handed down to us. So we implement those in our design. We have had a pre-application conference with DEP, at which I believe the township engineer attended. It was about this time last year. I think we had that and kind of laid out our proposed stormwater management plan. And that's what we're intending to execute based on the comments that the township engineer has made and some of the preliminary comments that we received from those outside agencies. But I agree with what the township engineer said. The intent of these provisional no detention districts is to get the water out before the peak crests coming down the receiving water course. And as engineers, we have an obligation to discharge to water courses. That's what the rules are. We don't, the DEP, the LVPC, even the townships don't want us discharging in random places across farm fields, which I'm sure you guys are seeing more and more of. What we call offsite discharge analyses, where we have to actually show that flow path to the creek. Here, you know, it is a blessing and a curse that we are in a zone AE where we are discharging. So that is a FEMA delineated 100-year floodplain. It's not a generic zone A. So right here, you have the confluence of the Little Lehigh floodplain as well as this tributary's floodplain. Pretty much as you work your way across Sauerkraut Lane, this turns into just more of a generic zone A. And a lot of this, ironically, was part of the conversation that we had with Brian's office when we talked about this culvert. You know, our concern, whenever you go in and replace a culvert, I would say people would agree 95% of all township culverts are undersized. When it rains hard, the roads flood. But what's holding all that water back is those culverts. You know, they're choking a lot of that water back. And so our intent here with the culvert replacement is to mimic those precondition, those pre-development conditions as much as possible. And it sounds like DEP and the township are going to work with us on that, so that we are maintaining those existing drainage patterns to a point where it's safe and effective, and we're not sending more water down too quickly down the stream. So in addition to the stormwater discharge, the culvert's also related to this, basically because of a similar concept.
Thank you. Sir, if you could just state your name and speak into the microphone.
My name is Rick Oster. My address is 3067 McCungy Road. I am the property that's right next to John's property and right next to the Little Lehigh Valley Creek, whatever you call it there. The picture you saw, the flood there, that's my property. You guys are telling me that you're going to put houses up there, and Paul had a great thing there, talks about the rainwater off of the roads and the roofs and all that stuff. Right now, you've got agricultural land there. When it rains, the water seeps into the ground. When the ground is saturated, once the ground is saturated, then the water runs into the creek. Now, when you start building houses there, put roads there, rooftops, all that none of that soaks into the ground anymore. You got everybody up there with their green grass growing. They're watering their grass on a regular basis. And when the rains come, that water, that ground's already saturated. All of that water coming off of that property, every ounce of it is coming down into that creek. You guys are talking about not putting a basin in there. If you don't put a basin in there, what's going to happen is my property is going to be the basin. Bottom line, it already is because of the way the culvert is. Now you're talking about fixing this culvert at Sauerkraut Lane. I haven't heard anyone talk about fixing the culvert there at Crick Lane, right next to my property. You just said all those culverts are undersized. It's obvious that the one that's at my property is radically undersized compared to what the water coming down there is. You guys are telling me that you got a plan in place that's going to resolve, that's going to make this better.
Well, we're going to make sure that the pre is and the posts are the same.
They're not going to make it worse. I think that's what they're
That's-
saying. They're not going to make it better, but they're not going to make it
All right.
worse.
And that's what I hear. Now, from what I understood, 4 agencies have told me that that's going to happen. What I want to know is what kind of recourse I have when that doesn't happen. All right? Because I can tell you what my, John's telling me he hadn't, his previous owners there hadn't had floods since what, 79? I've lived here for 5 years, maybe 6 years now, and I've had multiple floods every year. I think last year was the last year that I didn't have any floods. I've had floods take out my entire basement. I've had floods come within 3 feet of my back porch. So I know exactly how much flood water comes through there. And so when that water starts rising above that, what kind of recourse do I have? Because you guys are telling me that you're going to put a better plan in place. I have no engineering background to dispute that. But what I want to know is what you guys are going to do when I have more water because of this whole project. Anybody got any ideas on that?
I think the simple answer is we've done everything that we can. We have a plan that's come before us. We've had it reviewed by the township engineer.
I understand
It's
that.
going to be reviewed by DEP. All of these agencies are going to have to approve the stormwater plan.
I
don't-
understand all
I'm
that.
not sure what more you're looking for. All the
Well-
agencies that are responsible are going to approve and review your plan.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is you guys got a plan, okay? What happens when reality hits? All right? When reality hits and my property is flooded, that's reality. I don't care about your plan. That is my reality, and that's my problem now. So what you guys are doing is you're taking and building a bunch of houses up there, and you're gonna send the water down to my property and gonna give me the problem. That's the bottom line right there. That's exactly right. My property will be the retention retention pond.
We definitely do take this seriously. And honestly, I think that's the whole reason for us being here is to watch out for everybody else. The whole reason we review plans and check what people are doing is to ensure safety, health, and welfare. Our whole role is to watch out for you guys. And I think we take it very seriously. And we did look at
Well-
your property and Crick Lane. I personally had been out to that site, looked at that culvert, looked at this I walked that whole stretch of stream from the culvert all the way up to Sauerkraut Lane. I mean, we did take it seriously and we did really look. at it.
Well, taking it seriously is one thing, but I still haven't heard anything that's going to fix this problem. Like I said, they talk about,
We're not
Fixing
here,
the
we're not
culvert.
fixing your problem. We are here to make sure that what we're presenting and we're proposing meets the requirements of the law.
I understand that. And what I'm asking is what is my repercussions when that fails?
You will need, if that happens someday, then you'll have to consult with an attorney or an engineer to find out what your recourse is. We can't give you legal advice on that.
That's, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, experts. You guys know what you're doing. And a few years from now, we're going to find out whether you're right or not.
I'll be the last speaker. My name is George Kane. I live on Macungie Road at 2996. I look at Crick Lane coming on to Macungie Road. I've lived there for 5 years, and I have a series of photographs here that address the elephant in this room. The review that's being done for the plan, I understand, looks at the plan and what comes by the plan. It doesn't look at the elephant in the room, which is what's happening downstream, which is a big problem, has been a problem, is known to Public Works and the Director of Public Works. I had a nice meeting with Mr. Jones earlier today. I think he understands that the problem really emanates from the culvert at Crick Lane. It needs to be addressed. I understand that this is not a purview for the Planning Commission, but the review that's been done and all of the reviews and approvals are being done with blinders on. They're not looking at the source of the problem. That culvert fills up so fast at Crick Lane. I want to send pictures down the line here so you can all see them. They can be submitted as whatever, exhibits. I can swear on the Bible that this water is solely from the unnamed tributary to the Little Lehigh Creek. I've got photographs from 2018, 2019, 2020, two occurrences. In 2022, I have pictures of within the same half hour, the culvert at Sauerkraut and the culvert at Crick. And you'll see the difference.
But let's be clear, his property is in the 100-year floodplain and it's probably in the floodway of the creek.
Understood.
We all know we bought properties in the floodplain, but there's a township issue that's not being addressed. That's the point of this. And the review that's been done for your development, I understand, but it's been done with blinders on. And the township needs to hear that. And that has to be part of the record.
It's not being done with blinders on. They are required to look at statutes and ordinances when a plan is being reviewed. That is what the engineer is charged with. That's what the LCCD will be charged with. That's what DEP will be charged with. It's not a case of somebody looking with blinders.
Well, I respectfully disagree. And we have video, we have pictures. These flows go to the creek.
Why don't
The
you
water
hand us the,
levels-
you have your
water-
photos. Why don't you hand them to us and let us take a look at them?
My name is Betsy Kane.
Yeah,
wife-
let's one speaker at a time, please. Okay, everyone will have a chance to speak, but let's go one at a time.
I just want to make the point that the review that's being done is not taking into account the condition downstream.
I think you've
I
heard,
think we're probably all in agreement on that.
I think you've heard that they are taking what they need to take into account to comply with the ordinances. I
Yes.
think that's what you've heard tonight. Now, you may have a larger issue. I don't doubt that you have flooding and some drainage concerns in your neighborhood, but they may be unrelated. They appear to be unrelated to this
Well,
particular.
they're clearly
project.
unrelated to our project because the project is not built and they have existing water problems.
They
So
are clearly related to the unnamed tributary.
I
In
don't
present,
doubt that.
in present condition, okay? I'm not arguing that they are going to make it worse. They may make it worse. That's how I was going to start my remarks.
But you have two engineers that say they aren't going to make it
Right,
worse.
well-
Let's just be clear on that.
I'm a degreed engineer, also civil engineer, registered professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania, retired. Okay, so I think I have an opinion too. I also have evidence, okay, and that counts. So I appreciate that everyone review those photos. I'm available for questions. I'm available at any time. I can meet with people there. The township has a problem. It's water that hits that culvert, which is undersized, builds up, flows back against the current to flood Rick's property and John's property. It's a fact. I'm sorry, that can't be denied. So I appreciate the time and hopefully there's been a receptive ear or two here and the word gets passed along. We'll go to see the township commissioners as well. But there's a bit of a blind eye here when we're only looking at a piece of the pie.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, just state your name and speak
My
into the
name is
microphone.
Betsy Kane. I live at 2996 Macungie Road. And for anyone who thinks that perhaps we purchased a house in the floodplain, we did. We didn't build a house in the floodplain. It's been there since 1806. One of the observations I had as soon as I moved in was the culvert at Crick Road. You have obviously made some type of deal with the developer to increase the size of the culvert at Sauerkraut.
We're maintaining
Yeah.
the size of our sauerkraut.
They're rebuilding what's there
We are
They
fixing it.
rebuilding it. They're gonna replace it in kind.
and you're going to keep it the same size. Okay.
Which was a concern, that was
intact,
also part of
yeah.
the discussion. Did not want to let water down that past that. That was
Okay.
part of.
So in other words, the culverts are used as dams. Essentially.
Yes,
That's not a bad idea when you have the stream and the boundaries of the stream and it's owned by the township, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, Rick Oster owns the property that you are using as a de facto retention pond. And, you know, I've observed this and frankly, if I were Rick, I would have 5 years ago started finding an attorney and started coming after the township for not properly taking care of the stormwater drainage. You mentioned, Mr. Engineer, that the problem is a backflow from the Little Lehigh. I have video that shows it is not, okay? Of course, it's not going to work now, but this was taken
Could
from
you
Crick
email
Lane.
us?
Pictures were very self-explanatory.
Yeah, could,
I
Yeah.
agree. Or I see what you're saying. Water's going over the roads.
Yeah.
In that.
It-
Mhm.
it sounds to me that there needs to be a separate conversation with what existing
I'm
problems.
going to
that
have
they
my
have.
day in court here. The
Butterfield.
township will come and repair Crick Lane because it continually pops the asphalt off as it makes its way down to the Little Lehigh. So, you know, with the reporter here, I want to get things on record. I want to get our photos on record because although we knew that, I did know that property was being developed and I felt, okay, this is our opportunity to have a retention basin help the flow down that creek so that this issue doesn't happen. Well, I understand what they're doing with the retention basin. I've worked on school districts that had that same type of, in lieu of a retention basin, they were just trying to slow the water down and let it egress without erosion. I understand what they're doing, but as my husband said, the elephant in the room, and if this has to be addressed through the DEP, we will go to the DEP. We will go the next step. We understand you're probably going to approve this, but we just want to let the township know, you, and then the next levels, the commissioners, et cetera, that this is a large problem and it's not going away.
Thank you. Any further comment from the public? Additional comments from the Planning Commission? Maybe we can get some clarification from the township solicitor in terms of what our obligations are here. We heard a lot of comments about flooding and drainage issues. It seems like those drainage issues exist now before this project is even approved. So I would encourage you to go to the Board of Commissioners and ask them, perhaps they could authorize the township engineer to do a drainage study. This sounds like it's much bigger than this particular property. Ask the Board of Commissioners to authorize the township engineer to do a drainage study of your area to see if there are any solutions to some of the drainage problems that you brought up tonight. So I think that's one issue. Go to the Board of Commissioners, ask them to have the township engineer do a drainage study of your general area to see if there are any engineering solutions to what appears to be an existing problem. But the issue tonight, and why I asked the township solicitor, the issue we're dealing with tonight is, does this plan comply with the township requirements? If it does, if this plan complies with the township requirements, I think we've heard from our engineer and our planner that it does. We have an obligation as the Planning Commission to recommend its approval. If it doesn't comply with the township regulations, we can recommend that the Board of Commissioners reject the plan. But it's our obligation to approve it, or recommend approval of it, if it complies with the regulations. And I think we heard tonight that it does comply with the regulations. That's not in any way to say that you don't have drainage issues in your neighborhood or drainage issues that don't need to be addressed. It appears like they do need to be addressed, but you need to go to the Board of Commissioners to have that larger conversation. Okay, I just want to understand, just want everyone to understand where we kind of. Okay, now I'm not an attorney, so I just want to make sure that the things that I said are accurate, that we have an obligation to approve this if it meets all of the township requirements.
You have an obligation to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. That's based on what the township engineer has done, what the township planner has done, and the township code. And so you have an obligation to take what information they've given you and what the applicant has given you and make a recommendation to the board. The board decides, the Board of Commissioners decides whether to approve the land development or not. So that's your obligation tonight. And you can vote, it's a majority of the quorum. I did confirm that, so you can vote tonight.
So just so the residents know, we're not minimizing your concerns. We're not ignoring your concerns, but there are certain obligations that we have as township officials. Okay. All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion regarding the Cove at Mill Creek subdivision.
All right, it's fairly lengthy. So make a motion to recommend approval of the Cove at Millbrook subdivision. Motion to recommend approval of the Cove at Millbrook preliminary final plan conditioned upon the following. The applicant shall address all comments in the most recent township planning department, zoning officer, and township engineer review letters to the written satisfaction of each prior to plan recording. Number two, the applicant shall construct the macadam walking path in the 10-foot path easement as shown on the plan and provide an access easement to the township for a future trail and bridge over the unnamed tributary at the site, the location of which shall be reviewed and approved by the township engineer and township planning department. 3, a trail shall be constructed along the entire frontage of the property on Sauerkraut Lane to the intersection with Macungie Road to the satisfaction of the township engineer. 4, The applicant shall preserve all existing tree lines and as many existing trees as possible on the site. The applicant shall construct necessary improvements and modifications to the existing culvert under Sauerkraut Lane on the site as directed by the township engineer. These improvements shall be reflected on the final record plan. Number 6, a homeowners association shall be created for the development and provide the declaration and all other covenants applicable thereto for review and approval by the township solicitor. 7, all final landscaping, fencing, and site amenities shall be reviewed and approved by the township planning department prior to submission of plans for recording. Further motions. Well, I guess, do we want to do that portion first?
We can do that along with, make it all part of one big.
Waiver of section 22A-401 and 22A-501 requiring the submission of a separate preliminary and final plan. Waiver of section 22A-704.1.d requiring a minimum lot depth to width ratio of no less than 1:1. Lot 16 shall be permitted as shown by the applicant at a ratio of 0.8.
There's a motion to recommend.
There's actually more.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
more. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We have the back.
A partial waiver of Saldo 22A-705.2.a and 22A-705.1.f regarding widening of the cartway width of Macungie Road. Widening on Sauerkraut Lane shall be constructed as directed by the township engineer. Waiver of section 22A-705.3.b parentheses 1 regarding horizontal curves to be constructed as proposed by the applicant with the written approval of the township engineer. A partial waiver of Saldo section 22A-705.9 regarding frontage improvements on Macungie Road as the Macadam Trail will be built within the site in lieu of Macungie Road frontage improvements. There shall also be a partial waiver providing for the relief of the requirement to install curb on Sauerkraut Lane. All of these partial waivers shall be reviewed and approved by the township engineer. A partial waiver of Saldo section 22A-710.2.b parentheses 2 requiring street trees on Macungie Road where trees shall be installed to the written satisfaction of township planning department. That is the motion.
All right. Thank you, Wes. There's a motion to recommend conditional approval of the Cove at Millbrook preliminary final plan and the waiver requests for that plan. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment? Does the applicant understand the conditions?
The applicant understands and accepts the condition.
Thank you. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes by a vote of 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 2072 Elbow Lane minor subdivision. Nate, you would review the planning issues with us?
Yep, just give me a moment as I pull up the plan here for everybody. All right, so as everybody can see on the share screen here, the proposal is immediately adjacent to the recently approved and currently under construction Mountain View Estates subdivision. The Mountain View Estates subdivision at the intersection of Gregory Drive and Elbow Lane is the subject property. There's a pre-existing single-family home that fronts upon Elbow Lane with accessory structures at the rear. The proposal is to create 2 new building lots as well as a single lot for the existing structure, which the plan will show here just momentarily. I scroll down. You can see that the existing proposed, the existing lot is set here with the home, and then the new two proposed lots. It should be important to note that these two new lots will be independent and not part of the Mountain View Estates subdivision. They are independent. One of our comment letters, and this is less of a planning item and more of a technical item, is ensuring that these new properties have the means of receiving mail. As everyone is aware, the United States Post Service has changed standards for delivery of mail. New subdivisions are required to have banked community mailboxes. These two new lots will either need to receive mailboxes at the front of their driveway, or they will have to essentially potentially get a mailbox at the post office if they can't get delivery there. So this is something that we need to work with the applicant on. It's not a deal breaker issue, but it is important as we look at new residences because of these USPS standards. The proposed lot 2 and lot 3, because of stormwater management and being independent of the NPDES permit for the Mountain View Estate site, both have infiltration basins, infiltration fields, I should note, at the rear of each of their properties. We have reviewed internally, and per our saldo, there's enough room in the backyard that will allow for future expansion of patios, decks, et cetera. Obviously, if you look at where the plan is at, the zoning and planning and building department will need to also make sure that sheds and fences do not interfere with the water infiltration as required for these new residences. Again, at our last meeting, we did talk about frontage improvements on Elbow Lane. The proposal is to have them match now the existing dwelling that has been constructed as part of the first part of Mountain View Estates. And that will require the widening of Elbow Lane and the installation of a sidewalk along Elbow Lane, a pathway along Elbow Lane, as previously discussed. It's shown here on the plan. The only other outstanding planning item that we have, which is also in the Township Engineer's review letter, is several other species of street tree were suggested and included on the plan here. And again, we would advise for purposes of root heaving, that if there is enough space, moving street trees to the opposite side of the street would be advisable. But also the township engineer, the RLA and their department did provide a planting list that they felt would work best here. And it is recommended that that be what is utilized. Other than that, this is a minor subdivision, 2 new lots, 1 existing lot where the home will presumably be sold off as well. And we're happy to take any questions. I hand Brian any other the reins to address any other questions or bring up what's going on, but this is very much a minor subdivision. So.
Well, thank you, Nate. I think you pretty much said it all. We were before or these guys were, the applicant was before the board or the planning commission last month. We had concerns about widening on Elbow Lane, and that's been addressed. And to reflect Nate's comment, our RLA has provided some recommendations for street tree substitutions. But beyond that, we don't have any issues with the site. See no reason that this can't. We have no objection to this.
Should also note, just as a procedural, the modifications to the plan that have been submitted this month now no longer require any waivers to be requested because, yeah.
So there's no waivers needed for this project.
Right.
Alan, you're a familiar face, but maybe you just want to introduce yourself and who's with you tonight.
Sure. So I'm Alan Fornwalt with Keystone Consulting Engineers, and this is Mr. Paul Stepniak. He's the owner. You know, as everything that's been stated by the planner and the township engineer, you know, we're in agreement with, and the review letters are all will comply. And as was just stated, the suggestions for the street tree species will be adjusted. And that's also one of the comments. And so we'll make those adjustments before the Board of Commissioners see it, before it's submitted to them. And that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up for comments or questions from the Planning Commission. Okay. Comments or questions from the public on this plan? Anyone from the public like to comment? All right, at this time, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. Motion to recommend approval of 2072 Elbow Lane. You say it's Stepniak? Stepniak subdivision plan conditioned upon the following. The applicant shall address all comments in the most recent Township Planning Department zoning officer and township engineer review letters to the written satisfaction of each prior to plan recording. The applicant shall preserve all existing tree lines and as many existing trees as possible on site. Applicant shall offer for dedication all requisite right-of-ways, including the ultimate right-of-way per township ordinance. The applicant shall demonstrate that mail service is to be provided to 2 new dwelling units prior to plan recording. All final landscaping, fencing, and site amenities shall be reviewed and approved by the Township Planning Department prior to submission of plans for recording.
All right, there's a motion to recommend conditional approval of the Elbow Lane Stepniak subdivision plan. Is there a second to the motion? So motion and a second. Any further comment? I'll ask the applicant if you had a chance to look at the recommended conditions of approval and if you agree to the conditions of approval. All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes by a vote of 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is 6709 Mountain Road. This is the Stone Hill Haven Minor Subdivision. And Nate, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, we've heard from the applicants that they did not send representation this evening. They felt confident, given the last presentation before the Planning Commission, that if action were to occur, they'd feel comfortable. Again, this is another minor subdivision that is at the corner of Gaiman Road and Mountain Road. It is in our rural zoning district. The lot that is actually currently in place is the site of an existing early 1800s farmhouse. So there's a historical resource at the property here at the southwest corner. And then along the western corner along Gaiman Road, as it goes downstream, you will see that there's also, and it's a little hard to see here on the plan, but there is resource area in the way of some wetland area. There are some springs that do come from the mountain here, which do cause seasonal streams to flow down the mountain, as is the case elsewhere in the township. So we do have some natural resources to be wary of and cautious of here as well. This is the proposed lot 2. Proposed lot 2 consists of the existing home, which goes back. The newly proposed lot 1, which is the lion's share of the site, includes frontage on Gaiman Road, again, with this imperial stream and resource area. And then, of course, over here in what would presumably be the buildable area where there's a primary and secondary septic system proposed, as well as perk areas for a well. So this is going to be a single family home with a well and a septic system. 1 dwelling unit is all that is contemplated at this point in time. And given the lot size requirements in the zoning district, it can only ever be 1 lot. The only other outstanding planning item that we have brought up previously, the applicant did recently submit a proposed easement, as noted in our last letter and discussed at our last meeting, for the trail, which does come from the existing Stonehill Meadows neighborhood. That would go across the rear of the property here out to Gaiman Road. I would note, after reviewing that, one, we have 2 issues. The purpose of that easement, and again, we're not asking for a trail to be built, but just an easement, should we get grant funding or capital improvements funding in the future, is to connect that trail system, which then makes its way down to the Weiss and Woodmont and into Macungie Borough, up to the Wildlands Conservancy area that is on Mountain Road, which is slowly getting connected together to basically create a trail loop that goes up into the wilderness area on the mountain. Having it go over to Gaiman Road does not create that connectivity. We're asking for south to north, potentially on the exterior of the property over here. Again, the subject property for connectivity, where there's also an existing parking lot right now, is on Mountain Road here. Also, if we were to accept that easement, there's the matter of the stream and the need to build a bridge that would meet standards for the DEP and LCCD. So it would again be easy to go at the rear of the property. Other than that, this is also a minor subdivision that creates one new lot, and we have no further comments on the planning side. I defer to Brian if there's anything else. I would note in speaking with Zach Graves in our department, everything that is necessary has been done for both sewer and for the well.
Yeah, Nate, honestly, I think you basically covered it. This is before the planning commission last month. We generally, the only concern was just getting the waivers and the waivers together for this project.
Yeah, and again, the waiver that's recommended, and I apologize, because this is Mountain Road, it's a state road, it's a rural road. We do not recommend sidewalk, curbing, and street trees because we're trying to maintain the rural character of the street. So
Nate, do you have any further information on the easement, the easement for the trail? And you said that the property owner or the applicant wanted it to go along the one edge of the property, and you thought a better location was kind of to split the property in half and tie into the existing trail at Wildlands.
yeah, so this is the existing property here where Stonehill Meadows Loop Trail is, that goes up towards the mountain. The easement goes in the rear proposed setback line to Gaiman Road here. That is what they've proposed to us. Staff's recommendation is that it actually go around the edge here where there's a easy connectivity point. It's not shown on the plan, but then at the rear of the property and around. For the benefit, we recognize that there is going to be a single family home here, but again, it would just be a future access easement. So in addition to a trail construction, we'd also probably have buffer plantings and fencing, but it would go along the side of the property line here out towards the street. Also, I should note, if and when this occurs, we would need to work with PennDOT to ensure that there's a safe crossing along Mountain Road. So there's some legwork that would need to be done. We're just trying to secure the easement. So someday we could create that connectivity if we needed to.
Does the applicant agree to the location that you're recommending for the trail easement?
We've noted to them and I haven't heard back. So my recommendation to the planning commission would be an easement to the satisfaction of the township. This would be an item that we would discuss with the Board of Commissioners. And again, we would discuss with them a little bit further. We appreciate the offering of the easement, but again, it causes two issues. One, we would need to build sidewalk up Gaiman Road, and two, we would need to do the permitting to cross that creek, which can be difficult and lengthy, whereas going around the edge of the property and then working with PennDOT for a crossing to the property could be easier. So
Any comments or questions from the planning commission?
I was just gonna say, I think the easement is great forward thinking and a future asset to the municipality.
We'll open it up to the public. Any comments or questions from the public at this time? Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. Motion to recommend approval of 6079 Mountain Road, Stonehill Haven subdivision plan conditioned upon the following. The applicant shall address all comments in the most recent Township Planning Department, zoning officer, and township engineer review letters, the written satisfaction of each prior to plan recording. The applicant shall preserve all existing tree lines and as many existing trees as possible on site. The applicant shall offer for dedication all requisite rights of way, including the ultimate right of way per township ordinance. The applicant shall demonstrate that mail service is to be provided to the new dwelling prior to plan recording. The applicant shall offer a trail easement from the Stonehill Meadows trails through the property to provide improved connectivity to the open space owned by the Wildlands Conservancy on Mountain Road as directed and agreed to by the Township Planning Department. The easement shall connect north to south to Mountain Road. Any and all final landscaping, fencing, and site amenities shall be reviewed and approved by the Township Planning Department prior to submission of plans for recording. A waiver of Saldo Section 22A-705.9 regarding frontage improvements on Mountain and Gaiman Road, including curb, sidewalk, and street trees. That's the waiver.
All right, we have a motion to recommend conditional approval of the plan along with one waiver. Is there a second to the motion? Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes by a vote of 3-0. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Preliminary final plan for Spring Creek Estates.
And I'll pull that plan up as the applicant prepares, present to the planning commission. Please just give me a moment. That one did not load the way we had hoped it would. Okay, there we go. And for those members who are watching currently, or for those who will be watching on our YouTube channel, I do want to ensure that we begin the screen share here for you. So again, just bear with me for one more moment. I should note that this is a land development for two separate lots that are in close proximity to each other. Previously, the applicants appeared before the Planning Commission with two proposals. One, a conditional use application because one of the lots was going to house apartments. Two, for land development in each of the sites. The applicants have since modified their application to the township to include both lots to be townhomes, presumably for sale. That will be basically infill from existing Spring Creek Estates lots that are residual from previous development. This is right off of Lower Macungie Road, which essentially goes right down towards where the Giant Shopping Plaza is. So that gives you an idea of where we're located here. The last time the applicants appeared before the Planning Commission, we discussed challenges with ensuring that there's pedestrian connectivity due to the proximity of these new dwelling units. It will be easy to walk to the food store. It will be easy to walk to some restaurants. So we wanted to ensure that that trailing and walkability was in place. There is some existing trails in the general area. Second, dog runs, just because of ensuring that we have an area that is in the close locale for this. Previously, it was to be in this center area of the loop road that's proposed and the parking that's proposed. Given the possibility of headlights and conflicts with pedestrians and their dogs and cars, the applicants have moved it outside, and on both cases, which we appreciate. There is a PPL easement that does run very close behind some of these properties. So we would note again, as it was discussed previously, if this is going to be a single lot and owned by a homeowners association on a single lot, exterior improvements of these properties are going to be very challenging, if not impossible. So that means little decks coming out the back, little patios coming out the back are essentially, when they come in for a zoning application, going to be summarily, in some cases, denied. And that's just the nature of the development that's proposed. So that would need to be disclosed to buyers. The landscaping plan is incredibly generous for the site. We do appreciate that as always. It does provide privacy for these residents, especially on a busy road. So that is a benefit. We have looked at and reviewed the stormwater. One thing that we do want to check moving forward is the right of the applicant to convey their stormwater here. So documentation of that, we just want to button up. On the planning side, we will defer to the township engineer on this, but this interior muse with one access point and the loop road, we want to ensure that our largest fire truck, garbage delivery, plow trucks, delivery trucks, moving trucks can all get in and out relatively easily. It is tight. So we just want to make sure that that is something that is noted. Again, we appreciate, this shows it here in a little bit more detail, the landscaping that is proposed on each of the sites, the buffering on Church Lane, the buffering on Lower Macungie Road. There is some meadow area that's proposed. Presumably this is for stormwater quality. That's also a benefit for the stormwater quality end of things. We always recommend, if that's going to be utilized, that there be a generous amount of flowers in there as well. So we don't immediately get high weed complaints from our code department. If the flowers are in there, it's generally easier to explain to passersby who might be making the complaint that it's there on purpose for stormwater management purposes. as opposed to if it was just grass. Last but not least, one of the only other comments that we had here, we recognize that the number of parking spaces that are proposed do meet the prior zoning officer's review and standard. What we have found in practice in the township is that many households are becoming multi-generational in the township. And in dense communities, especially ones with townhomes, that means multiple cars per dwelling unit, and sometimes parking can be relatively difficult. So if you do have potentially 3, maybe even 4 cars per dwelling unit, the number of spaces that are proposed sometimes is a bit of a challenge. And then interiorly, as you can see here, on-street parking is not going to be possible. It's either parking in the driveway, in the garage, or in the allotted spots. Otherwise, we should recognize that Steinway, Church Lane, Danner Road might have on-street parking of future residents. So it's just a matter of concern that we should just keep in the back of our mind. Does it meet the zoning officer's review? Yes. But moving forward, as we continue to look at it, we just advise, especially in a higher density development, such as townhomes, that we always have enough parking spaces for the multi-generational households and visitor parking that we're seeing on the ground right now here in the township. Other than that, those are the existing planning comments, and I defer to Brian on any other technical items.
All right, thank you, Nate. So just to speak to the stormwater management, the basins were, the impervious surface for these properties was accounted for in the Spring Creek Estates subdivision originally. The basins were sized for the impervious that's on these, for the proposed impervious for these lots. The applicant is actually proposing less than what was originally approved on the original plan. And then I'd also like to add that they are also providing the underground infiltration beds for water quality with this site. So we felt that the stormwater management portion of this project is addressed. Beyond that, I think Nate already touched on this, but the circulation for emergency services definitely need to see approval from Township Fire Marshal. And I'd like to note that the landscaping and this plan is actually a substantial improvement from what you guys provided last time. So thank you.
Applicants' representatives are with us tonight, familiar faces. Just introduce yourselves so we have your names and your positions for the minutes.
I'm Joe Brenko, the engineer for the project.
My name is Jeff Fleischaker, attorney for the applicant.
You heard the reviews by our professionals. Do you have anything to add?
There's one thing I'd like to add. There is a note on the May 3rd review letter. Specifically, it's note 6A, which talks about a geotechnical report identifying characteristics of underlying rock formations. We've prepared that as an additional waiver request. This is a subdivision that was approved in 12 years ago now. It is assumed by the applicant that a geotechnical survey was done of this 11 or 12 years ago now. To require us to do it again at this point seems a little bit heavy-handed and unnecessary. So I do have a letter that I can submit tonight, adding that to the waiver request to the additional 2 waivers that had already been included in the original application. If that's, Mr. Chairman, that's okay with you.
Sure. Please hand it to our planning director.
Additionally, with the concern about the emergency vehicles, I know the plan was created. One of the notes was that we need to address the size of the vehicle in which the assumptions were made. That's something that can be done in drafting as we go. And that's something that's a perfectly acceptable condition for us. From that, it doesn't really seem like there were too many objections that need addressing from us. Everything seems to have been addressed fairly well from the last time. It's just a matter of some outside agency approval and some drafting notes that we're more than willing to agree with and to follow through.
Will there be a homeowners association? Is that the plan?
It's privately owned. So
What about I'm assuming that the loop roads are going to be maintained by someone other than the township.
the owner, it's all private. Everything.
So the owner's going to maintain them
Correct.
themselves.
Yep, the owner, yeah. So there's no HOA intended right now. It's the owner is going to own and maintain all the private facilities.
So will these townhomes then not necessarily be for sale? They'll be for rent?
They'll be for rent,
Understood. Okay.
which helps with the not the ability, lack of ability to put patios and decks because you have control of the owner and who would potentially be coming in for those, with those applications.
Understood. Okay.
Sounds like there's a couple of things, loose ends that maybe we need to.
Yeah, with this letter, if it's okay with the applicant, with this letter that we've received, what we would like to do then is prepare a motion and share it with you prior to the next meeting, and then we would vote on the motion at the next meeting.
I think that's fine, so long as we have an understand. I don't want to have a no-show. That felt very weird. But we're happy to show up again, so long as we can address any other issues that the board has tonight. If we're going to have another hearing, let's be full and formal about making sure that we have all the issues addressed as best that we possibly can coming to that meeting.
That's great. I mean, having received this, I'd like to share it with Brian and make sure that we get it factored into a.
I wanted to share with Brian.
Okay. We'll get everything together then for the next meeting. And I don't think we have an MPC time clock extension issue. I'll check with you if we do, but I don't think we do.
I think when we exchanged emails, it was July that I think.
Yeah, I think we have enough time because what will happen then is that the next month in June, at the planning commission, you receive a recommendation. The plan would go before the Board of Commissioners at their June workshop, and then we would vote at the July meeting. So.
I have
Yeah, go ahead.
two very quick questions. So, Nate, you had brought it up. So parking is permitted on Steinway and Danner, or it is prohibited?
Well, we do need to check the status of that on whether those are no parking roads. That would be a township code thing. So I can check with Vince Trangucci, who's our head code enforcement officer and building code official. Again, I should note that Mr. Best, prior to his retirement, did do the calculations, did find it to be adequate. One thing that we see then, again, as we always say consistently, is point one, garages, sometimes if there's to be garages, can be used as sheds and not as parking. So if you're counting that as a parking space, you really are only getting one driveway spot and then the spots that are included on the site. So again, depending on how many residents are in each one of those units and the number of cars, it could lead to unintended off-street parking.
Definitely.
Between now and
That's
then,
why I
we can
asked.
check on those streets to see if there is any no parking or standards that have been employed as part of Spring Creek Estates originally, as part of the original subdivision, to see if there would be enforcement issues, but I don't have that answer right now.
And moving forward, that becomes very difficult from a planning perspective for the applicant to try to guess what people are going to do. We can put in, if it's a owner-owned, owner-maintained facility, we can put some restrictions on use of the garages. Can't be for sheds or for storage. They need to be for actual parking spaces. And we can make allocations for only a certain number of parking spaces per unit. There are actions and variables out of our control. So we're compliant with the zoning. We're compliant with the ordinance at this point. We're willing to work with you to figure out the right answer to that moving forward to make sure it's not a.
Is the flow of traffic around the loop road, is it one way or is it two way?
It's two-way.
It's two way.
Yep, it's 24 to 26 feet wide for that.
Not that I would recommend this, but if there is a parking problem, people will probably park along the edge of the loop road.
And that can be it from a planning perspective. We can address that with no parking signs on the loop road. If that's a consideration and a recommendation as we get to approval. we
I
can-
guess I'm saying it might be better to park along the loop road than to park along Steinway.
Might be the only place you can park if there's no parking on Steinway, but we'll address those issues as we go. Again, trying to guess the variables at this point, rather than swinging a moving target. If it's a concern, then we can add that we'll put no parking signs on the loop road to make sure that that's a protected area.
Okay. Before we entertain a motion to table, let's just open it up. If there's anyone from the public who would like to comment or has a question regarding this project. All right, then I'll entertain a motion to table. Is there a motion? We have a
Make that
motion. Is there a
motion.
second? Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion is approved by a vote of 3-0. We'll see you next month.
You have the date for next month?
There is.
Yes. 1 minute.
It is, I believe, June 13th, but let me check that. June 13th, Tuesday, June
Yep.
13th.
Thank
June
you very
13th, 6 PM.
All right, next item on the agenda is Lehigh Valley Town Center Top Golf Conditional Use Application.
All right, moving right along. We do have, please excuse me for a moment while I pull it up here. We have received a conditional use application following the successful passage of the zoning ordinance for the HE district to allow mixed use within the HE Highway Enterprise Zone. This is not new to anybody here in this room, nor I believe the general public at this point in time. There is a proposal for a mixed-use development and Top Golf at the confluence of Route 78, 222 Hamilton Boulevard on what was previously an industrial site and is currently also some agricultural land. As you see here, this is a full build out of the site, which contemplates both the anchor user, which is Top Golf, a family commercial recreation and restaurant use is contemplated at the northern portion of the site, as well as here in the mixed use area, a north, south, east, west Main Street concept, which would include up to 500 apartments, a working farm gardening area, retail tenants, office tenants, potentially a hotel, grocer, restaurants, et cetera, as one generally sees in one of these large scale mixed use developments. I would go on the record and note, as we've been telling many people and who are members of the public, that this proposed mixed use concept close to interchanges and infrastructure as this is proposed is fairly common now, especially in the northeast and southeast sections of the country. So this is quite common. And I will go on as record as noting that this land was previously our most intense industrial zoning district. In our 2019 zoning exercise where we rewrote the ordinance, we created the Highway Enterprise District for economic development purposes and to bring the area to highest and best use at the gateway and entranceway to Lower Macungie Township. I will go on record as saying that what is proposed here is the highest and best use for the site. It is a mixed use development close to infrastructure. While our understanding is that much of the mixed use area is still in flux, we have been working very closely with the applicant, their design team, their legal team, and the folks from Top Golf to discuss Top Golf as the anchor tenant for the site. And I do know that we have representatives here this evening. We have looked at it extensively. You can see that this plan does include a boulevard that will connect Shantz Road and the bypass. Again, Cedarbrook Road, which is off on the corner here, has the new Guardian storage, as well as several residences, AB Stone and the Holiday Inn. So this is an area that is very business focused. I would like to hand it over to Brian. I would note that we do not have a formalized engineering review of the conditional use yet. Some planning topics with respect to the Top Golf. We have received the exterior elevations. And I would just like to get to that for a moment here. This is actually was delivered to us today is a 3D viewing of what the area could look like from an aerial viewpoint. The larger building here is actually a parking deck that's anticipated as well as part of the use. And then I do just want to get to, and actually it is in the PowerPoint. I'm going to stop the share. Please excuse me. We have the streetscape version that has been shown to the township so far. So this would be a street level view. Again, we've spoke with the applicants extensively about the importance of the streetscape and the street level businesses. So this is what it could look like upon construction. And then I do want to get to what was shared with us for the Top Golf rendering. And this is in a PowerPoint, so it might take a moment to load. And there's the visualization of the proposed Top Golf for here in Lehigh Valley. You can see, as the applicants have noted previously when they came in with a sketch review, this includes exterior dining and recreating area, as well as the interior restaurant, the interior bar, and then of course the golf bays, which will house the climate controlled driving area. With that, I'd really like to hand it over to the applicants. We do know that the anchor user Top Golf is on a timeline. I would note, as we had some discussions with the applicant's team, much of the mixed use component is still in flux. So we will need, further documentation and discussions on the design aspect of that. But tonight, I think would be in everybody's best interest to focus on the anchor user, which is Topgolf. So I'll hand it over.
Attorney Schock, I don't know if you want to introduce your team?
Sure. Eric Schock from Fitzpatrick, Winston, Buba.
John McRoberts from Pidcock.
Todd Waldo with Top Golf.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think we'll start with John. We've done this a couple of times now where we've run through what's proposed. There's probably, I guess I'd characterize it as a bit more meat on the bones now. And we've submitted the conditional use. John can walk us through the entirety because we did, as Mr. Jones indicated, submit the conditional use application for the entire mixed use development. That's what's before you right now.
Sure. And Nate's introduction was very thorough. So since this is our fourth time in front of the planning commission with the project, fifth, if you count an informal courtesy of the floor back in September, we don't want to take too much time. Nate mentioned the conditional use application that was submitted last month. And like Eric said, more meat on the bones. It shows the entire master plan for the entire development. We've been discussing throughout the process of the rezoning and the processing the zoning amendments that certain parts of the project, we're going to move forward more rapidly than others. That's still the case. When you look at the conditional use plan, probably the first thing you see is the orange outline that surrounds the Topgolf and the initial infrastructure that's going to be needed to support the Topgolf. The first part of the Spine Road with the realignment of Cedar Brook Road, improvements at Route 222, and public utilities and stormwater facilities. That's what we have in mind initially as the minimum that needed to support Topgolf. And that's going to move forward as rapidly as we can. That includes a 2-story building. It has 72 hitting bays, restaurant, event space, up to 360 parking spaces that will have landscaping, lighting, all in accordance with township requirements. Safety nets, the parking lot has 360 spaces on the plan now. Of course, as we go through the land development phase, that may change slightly upward, slightly downward. We're considering using the parking in reserve. So we'll design additional parking spaces. They may not get built right up front, so we don't add all the impervious surfaces, but we'll design them and plan for them so that if there is a demand, they're ready to go. One minor change in the Topgolf layout you may notice from prior plans is that we rotated the building ever so slightly, about 10 to 15 degrees clockwise. That helps with the lighting. One of the meetings with the planning commission expressed a concern about lights from the Topgolf affecting Route 78, affecting neighbors on the north side of Route 78. So the current building alignment keeps the lights from shining toward the apartments further north in South Whitehall Township, puts them perpendicular to Route 78 so they wouldn't accidentally be shining in somebody's eyes as they're coming on the Route 309 on-ramp. And it does not go far enough that it would point into any of the residential and the senior facility, Cedar Brook to the north. Outside of the orange line, the remainder of the development program includes a grocery store, 170,000 square feet of retail space, 20,000 square foot of restaurant, 70,000 square feet of office space, 65,000 square feet of medical office, 100 hotels rooms, and a 60,000 square foot commercial family entertainment area. The commercial uses, they're clustered together in a walkable, unified town center community. That'll have a common design theme. That'll include tree-lined boulevards, generous pedestrian facilities, attractive exterior finishes, and a design manual that's going to tie all those various buildings together. The commercial buildings and that sense of community are supported and enhanced by apartments over the retail buildings and freestanding apartment buildings. And although the zoning ordinance allows up to over 700 units, we know that at least one member of the Board of Supervisors had a reservation about that density number. So in an effort to hopefully sway the opinion and garner full support from Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors, we voluntarily, in this plan that's before you tonight, limited the number of residential units
to 550 units. I think there was more support from the supervisors at that number.
I'll just add that, the plan that's now proposed wouldn't need any other zoning relief other than the conditional use relief at this point, right, John? No variance is being requested. We're compliant. Now, obviously, some might say that's because the ordinance changed, but the bulk of this retains a lot of the concepts from the mixed use that was permitted. Because if you recall, what this did was it added mixed use to the HE. It made some tweaks to allow for the Topgolf and some of the unique aspects of this. But it also did require us, as John mentioned, to have the buildings with retail on the first floor and apartments up top. That was a concession to make and create this walkable downtown type atmosphere. But otherwise, the majority of the elements from your existing mixed use developments, the design guidelines for how the buildings will be designed, all of those are present here and being met.
There's some terms in the legend that I haven't seen before. A retail boulevard experience. What is a retail boulevard experience?
So the Jandals have a partner involved with them for the town center development. The retail boulevard experience is the rendering that we've been showing at the last few meetings. That's the retail component on the first floor, apartments above. Hopefully we have enough occupancy and there are enough people present that it's going to lead to a real sense of community, busy, give you that downtown feel in a suburban area.
And it gives you a Main Street
Yes.
look and feel.
Yes.
That just happens to be the consultant's phrase for how they describe that concept we showed you. Neither John nor I can take credit for conceiving.
And how about a regenerative farm? What is that all about?
Yeah, so our thinking behind the regenerative farm, we can share the seat. The idea behind the farm is a working farm, a sustainable farm that can grow produce that would support the development, right? So you live there, you live on the property, produce is produced on that farm that can be sustainable and serve the people living there, full circle, healthy centric. That's the idea of the regenerative organic.
And who would oversee the farming activities? Like who owns that land and makes sure that it doesn't become a big weed patch?
Yeah. We're still looking for a couple of farmers. Now, we are in communication with an organization locally that supports projects like this, overseen by our family. We're farmers ourselves, of course, but there's a local organization, you might be familiar, in the county over, that has done a similar project at a medical facility in Northampton County. We'd be looking for a similar concept here, managed by their expertise.
There's an area between number 11, the entertainment facility, and 9, which is the regenerative farm. It looks like an open area. Is that, on the one plan, it shows it as a stormwater management facility. And on the other, it looks almost like a recreation facility. Will it double up as? So is it going to double up as both stormwater management and a recreation area, or what do you foresee that area being?
Which number is it?
It's between 11. Yeah, it's that area right there, and 9. On the one plan, it had stormwater management, but that plan looks like it has trails.
Yes, the sheet 1 is the latest and greatest plan. Sheet 2 was provided just to give you the context of the town center development, primarily the town center development. There's an excerpt shown on sheet 1.
There will be open space areas throughout the development. The specific locations of those are still being worked out as we do our stormwater design during the land development phase.
So that could be one of the open space areas.
It could be, yes. It will be either there are two green spaces, that one below number 11. Or there's also a green space near Shantz Road.
That one's a little out of the way. I'm sure if people who live in the apartments want to recreate in some way, that space between 11 and 9 is probably the perfect spot for them.
Yes, there is a creek that runs through there, so we did have in mind something linear along the creek. That enters the property just to the left of number 9. Right. And it flows to the north toward Route 78. So that's going to have a generous buffer. There's a DEP required buffer. There's a township required buffer. There may be some storm facilities in there interspersed in that open space in the green area.
Could it double up both as stormwater and recreation areas? Is that a possibility?
We've got another project in the township where we did where we had meadow areas planted for stormwater irrigation, and we had a path that meandered through that meadow area. Probably at some location on this plan, we'll have something similar to that when we do the actual stormwater design, the detailed design that is.
In the, what I'll call the donut hole of the apartment, the main apartment complex, is that an area for recreation?
Yes, just for the apartment owners or residents.
Open it up for comments, questions.
I'll just say it's been interesting to watch it grow as it comes to fruition. So
Yeah,
keep it going.
It's maturing very quickly.
It's an exciting project.
Yes.
And I give you guys a lot of credit for trying to create something unique, something that's has that Main Street concept and is a very attractive project. So I give you guys a lot of credit. This is, from a planning perspective, this is probably the best plan that I've seen come through the Planning Commission. So congratulations.
Thank you. So I guess as we alluded to earlier, the Topgolf is going to move forward very rapidly. So if there's anything specifically regarding the Topgolf that you have questions on, or that you'd like more information, or that we can provide to the Planning Commission, or any concerns with the Topgolf that we should address at this time, we'd like to get as many of those into the open and have a discussion regarding those items if possible.
I actually do have one. I'm also the liaison right now for the Planning Commission since Mr. Russ retired for our Environmental Advisory Council. I'd like to note that the Environmental Advisory Council reviewed this plan as well. They're also very excited about it. They were also very excited about the generous amount of landscaping and open spaces that appeared to be on here. They did submit a letter and a question with respect to migratory birds and the nets. And I said, after they mentioned that, we pulled it up immediately, and it looks like it's something that Topgolf has already dealt with. So if Mr. Waldo has a moment on it, I'm sure it's something that the company already has in hand. It looks like they've dealt with previously and even more environmentally sensitive areas. I mean, this is essentially our urban core in the region, but that is something that they brought up. So.
Yeah, yes, sir. That's something you alluded to is more concern in a coastal area, near a flyway, river, creek, something of that sort. We're located along an interstate corridor, so I don't foresee that will be a concern whatsoever. We do have an emergency protocol in place that if something were to happen, we engage wildlife, management to assist in that. But I don't foresee that being a concern along the interstate corridor here. Sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a rather large structured parking area. And I know some parking areas are very attractive. And then other parking decks, not so much. Do you have a plan to, I mean, you have such a nice design and a Main Street concept going on here. How do you plan on integrating such a large parking structure into your overall Main Street feel for the project?
So the need for the parking structure is to maintain that feel. Everything has to be walkable. We can't have the parking fields a half mile away. We wanted to keep everything centralized and compact. So we definitely knew upfront that a parking deck was going to be needed to meet that, the demand. Traffic in the Lehigh Valley is very dependent on cars, probably more so than other areas. So a design manual will be constructed. That parking deck will be integrated with the other buildings, as you can see. Number 4 is the residential building, either attached or somehow integrated, and it will have, high-end features and it.
I think what I'm hearing is it's going to look more like one of the buildings rather than a parking deck.
As much as possible, yeah.
And what about the area just north of number 2, the plaza? Where all of the intersections kind of come together? Do you see that being a traffic circle, or how does traffic navigate that area? It could be very confusing for some drivers.
Yes, so the gray areas on this plan, those are the streets, those are open to vehicular traffic. The brown areas, those are intended just for pedestrian traffic. Number 2 is intended to be a plaza area. They'll have outdoor programming, again, all part of that community feel, community programs, outdoor events. That's the place for that. Keep some open space in the middle of that town center, in the middle of that downtown area.
Entirely in the wall.
Correct.
We'll open it up to public comment. Was there, I know you said that Topgolf wants to move and move quickly, and I understand that. Is there any thought given to possibly pulling out the Topgolf part of this project and running that through the conditional use process by itself, maybe to get ahead of the rest of the project?
If need be. As you've seen through this process. Yes, sorry. Yeah. To the extent necessary to keep Topgolf on its timeline, it's already represented as phase 1. We would do that because that component can't be tied to the mixed use component if the mixed use component will ultimately delay it by them both being together, right? So we will do that. As you've seen, the mixed use, as I'll call it, component continues to evolve. And as John stated, probably not shown there in as much detail. I mean, John, that Topgolf is finished. So from our perspective, we're ready to go on the Topgolf portion. The Topgolf portion is phase 1 with the infrastructure that's needed to support it. And if necessary, we will do that.
That might be the better way to go. That way, the mixed use portion of the project doesn't slow down Topgolf. It sounds like Topgolf is done and ready to go.
Right. So for example, if you were to say, would you do that this evening and we'll make a recommendation on the Topgolf? My answer would be an unequivocal yes.
I know we've got some challenges ahead, but our goal would be to open this venue by the end of 2024. I know that's a heavy lift, but certainly looking for some support tonight to advance that cause.
I'm going to have to turn to the professionals, and if you have any reservations with possibly making a recommendation on just the Topgolf portion of the conditional use application.
There's no engineering review letter, right? Okay, so the township engineer hasn't issued a review letter yet, and the application was presented as a combined application. So I think we'd want to at least note in writing that it's being phased or separated or whatever you want to call it. I don't think a recommendation is appropriate.
Frankly, I think if we have those two items taken care of in the amount of time that has been spent specifically on the Top Golf end of things, we would be ready to proceed after those two items are addressed.
So Brian, you really haven't had a chance to look at this from an engineering perspective at all? That answers.
On the conditional use application, because it's,
I have not had a chance to look at the conditional use
Yeah.
application.
that was submitted 3 weeks ago, maybe, right? The
It
ordinance,
was,
right?
it was submitted shortly after the ordinance passed. Yes.
Will it be easier and quicker for you just to review the Top Golf portion rather than the whole thing?
Absolutely, yes. Do you want, yeah, it was obviously submitted as a full application for the mixed use and the Top Golf. If you want to just split it out, that would certainly be quicker.
I think you're hearing things will be easier for the township engineer and we could possibly get you in front of the planning commission for a recommendation on the Top Golf portion as early as the June meeting.
Whatever the wish of the board, we will, we appreciate that. The only thing I would suggest and ask you is, we understand that the review letter hasn't been in, but could we get, is there a possibility we can, you would consider a conditional approval to move this thing on? And it could be conditioned upon compliance with the engineer and the township staff's comments.
I'm a little hesitant to do that only because he hasn't even had a chance to review it.
Tommy's smiling though. He's smiling.
I'm only laughing because you're saying I can add whatever comments I want. You're just gonna agree to all of them. All right.
And Tom, the only reason, and we're not going to push it, whatever you decide, we'll respect, but it just happens that on this Friday, they're going in, our good friends are going in for the final ratification, and to have this recommendation in hand would be helpful. Thank you.
There are certainly a lot of time sensitivities around it. So understanding.
And we want to work with you on that.
Yes, sir.
We're understanding of that. How do the planning commission members feel? This would be a little out of the ordinary for us to make a recommendation without having the engineer's review letter or really having any assurance from the engineer.
Does Top Golf as standalone require conditional use?
Yes.
It does.
Yes. As an entertainment and as a outdoor driving range use, it is a conditional use. Yes.
I'll say this, why I foresee this passing without issue or minor issue that would be easily fixed, it would be out of character for what we do. And to me, staying in character of what the municipality does time and time again is the better practice. And I think that's what we should do.
Oh, Ozias, you have any thoughts?
I think having the additional time for the review would be useful. I think clearly we're in support of this and want to see that things are able to proceed in an expeditious fashion. I'm not sure if there is a compromise there, but I think having time for Brian to review the proposal and splitting it out.
Would something short of a formal recommendation from the planning commission help you?
Well, I mean, I think it's been discussed of some type of conditional approval, but certainly if the planning commission is not comfortable in doing so, we don't want to put you in a difficult spot. So just wanted to have it open for consideration tonight.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point, we'll open it up to public comment if there's any public comment. And is there a motion to table? I submit the motion. We have a second. We have a motion and a second to table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Request would be that we submit to sever the conditional use into two components, phase one and the phase two. And we will have an engineer's review letter on the Top Golf so that we can get a recommendation at the June meeting.
That is the
Is that how
plan, and
I
I
am
think
to
you heard a
understand that?
commitment from
Yes.
everyone here.
And
Okay.
then in addition to that, we will circulate the recommended conditions of approval, which would be factored into the conditional use hearing and the ultimate decision to make sure that it's acceptable for the applicant
Okay.
team, so that immediately upon a recommendation by the planning commission, we can schedule the conditional use hearing and proceed forward with with the formal approval, the legal approval.
Okay,
Perfect.
the motion passed by a vote of 3-0 to table. So we'll see you next month.
Thank you all. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you, everybody.
Next item on the agenda is Raising Canes, Trexler Business Center, Hamilton Boulevard.
Yep, and I'll pull that up for everybody. If we want to let the room clear for a moment here, I will pull up the.
I have to say, I've never heard of Raising Canes, but it's a great name.
So, yes, Raising Cane's, which is a chicken finger, I would say a chicken finger, only and expertise, purveyor, is, coming to, Hamilton Boulevard, right next to the Movie Tavern. It'll be the only Raising Cane's outside of the city of Philadelphia and, Lower Bucks County in the area. And I guess the only other close one after that, I think, is in New York City. So this would be a first for the region, and we've already heard, since it's been announced, a lot of excitement from residents who have called and asked us about it already. So as I pull up the plan here, I want to note again, most importantly, this is the last remaining lot that is associated with the Trexler Business Center. And as the last.
Excuse me,
remaining-
Nathan.
Yes.
Were you able to get ADA on the architect?
Yeah, actually, give me a moment here. I apologize. I was so busy getting the plans up. Which attendee is ADA? I will make them a participant. Is it Andrea?
Andrea, yes.
Okay, Andrea, I'm going to promote you to a
Adam.
panelist.
Adam's also.
Okay, and I'm also going to promote you to a panelist. That gives you the ability to speak. Okay. Great. And you can turn on your cameras if you so choose as well. I would note that the proposed Raising Cane's is very similar in its layout, in that it is a dine-in restaurant, but it also will have a double drive-through. And we have been working closely with the applicants now on this for some time as well. So here's the entirety of the Trexler Business Center is currently constructed. Just to give those in the gallery here, as well as those watching from home, some background. This is the Movie Tavern. We have First Commonwealth Federal Credit Union's corporate headquarters here, as well as their branch up in the corner. We have the veterinarian's office, Bastion Carpet, the approved Wawa drive-through, which I should note is going to be going under construction very shortly. So you will soon see construction activity take place there. And at the very last pad here at the corner of the site is where the proposed Raising Cane's is. Here is the proposed site next to what is already the proposed and approved Wawa. That'll begin construction shortly. And as one would expect, there's the double drive-through. There's associated parking. And there is, much to our delight, and we are thanking them for this, there is significant outdoor dining. We do want to make sure that should we ever have the need for outdoor dining again, that is available. There's a very generous landscaping plan that's included with this. Everybody may be familiar with the soldier row of arborvitaes that separate the developments here. The applicants are proposing a very generous landscaping plan. There's a through lane that we'll go through. And again, and I should note that Lanta was particularly appreciative of this. In addition to the walking trail that we have on Hamilton, The walking trail will go back into the site here and will connect into the Raising Cane site, which is good for those who are utilizing public transportation in the area. There's a proposed sign here at the entrance, the internal entrance to Trexler Business Center, as well as the applicants will be coming to the zoning hearing board for a monument sign out on Hamilton Boulevard. The monument sign needs to comply with our streetscape ordinance plans, and I can pull it up and we can state at this time it does. From a planning perspective, and I will pull up the exterior elevations here, I really only have 3 comments, and I know that 2 of those one of those comments will probably be echoed by the township engineer. On the front end, every single facade of this restaurant is very generous and very nice and meets our design guidelines. There are varied architectural elements, which is great. The front entry elevation is going to be seen from when you come in from the Trexler Business Center side. Then there are the other 2 drive-through / service sides where you'll see the exterior dining and the drive-through window. The rear elevation of the site is what faces Hamilton Boulevard. And as we discussed recently regarding the Home Depot, we would note that it is in our design guidelines and in our ordinance that if you're fronting on Hamilton Boulevard, the appearance of a street front is of a storefront is part of the ordinance and part of the design guidelines. I think that there's a lot to work with here in terms of either another mural. We worked with other applicants on faux windows, awnings, essentially whatever embellishments that they would like to bring to us to show that it's the front of the building, we can work with. We're not overly specific. We're not saying there must be an entrance point where people are going to come in and out. We recognize that the drive-through is going through there, but the frontage is on Hamilton Boulevard. So we want to make sure that there is some sort of architectural enhancement on that side. I mean, every other side of this building is right in line with the users, what they're doing across the board at their other locations, but also in line with what our design guidelines state. So that was point 1. Point 2, we did note that the street wall, which is required to essentially block headlights. We always like to remind people that it has as much function as it does fashion, and it's essentially to block headlights from going out onto Hamilton Boulevard and elsewhere, is being proposed as a Trex material fence. And we would note that with Wawa doing the stone material right next door, the recommendation is just to have the 2 match because they're right next to each other, and it would provide cohesiveness for the development. So that is a request on the planning side. Beyond that, the landscaping plan is very generous. Each and everything that I looked at on my end seems like it's going to work out great. The only 2 other comments, and again, that would be more of an engineering comment to look at to make sure the turning radiuses work. The way that the parking lot is set up, we want to make sure that maneuverability is possible. We want to make sure that the delivery trucks, just like with the Wawa proposal, those delivery trucks are not coming during regular business hours because we do have a dual drive-through here. So getting those big delivery trucks through during business hours may be a bit of a challenge. And the same would go for garbage pickup due to the location of the dumpsters, which is at one of the access points to the site. So if we have garbage pickup at the lunch rush hour, at the dinner rush hour, we could have a challenge. I would also go out on a limb and state that we expect that this is going to be a very successful site and it's going to be very busy during the first few months or year of operation, and that the business owners may wish to consult with Movie Tavern and the other members of Trexler Business Center about how they could potentially queue or manage the incoming traffic that is going to likely occur due to the site opening up. We feel that this is going to be incredibly successful, which is a good thing, but also how is the internal traffic going to get managed if for the first few months, even the double drive-through is going to be taxed by the number of people attending the location. Last but not least, it was brought up by one of our elected officials, and we do want to note on the side, there is connectivity between Texas Roadhouse and the site. When we had a pre-application meeting with Raising Cane's, there was a concern that was brought up about people utilizing their site for parking for another use, which is understandable. However, the plans that were accepted and approved by the township previously for Texas Business Center did show that connectivity, and I believe the majority of it was for life safety purposes for the fire department and whatnot. So I know that that is a question that could come up again. But procedurally speaking, that is something that was brought up in the past. Beyond those items, no other planning comments. Welcome to the township. We're very excited to have you.
There's no review letter, so do you have any comments?
Sure. I just wanted to state that this plan is open and currently open on my desk and is under review. I'll have a letter back to you guys shortly. It is part of the Trexlertown Business Center, so just like the Wawa, stormwater was accounted for with this individual lot, as well as water, sewer. So there are existing utilities out there. Kim Flanders from our office has reviewed the landscaping. Felt that it was provided more landscaping than it was actually required, so that was good. And then I just had a question about the offsite grading that is on the Texas Roadhouse property. If you guys need cross easements or what's the story with that? Thank you.
Eric Schock from Fitzpatrick Lunson, Booba.
Yeah, Bud Newton from Newton Engineering.
Michelle Robinson, project manager for Raising Cane's.
And we do have representatives online from ADA Architects and from Raising Cane's. And we do have Derek Scrifoss, who's representing the owner here tonight. So just to reiterate, start with what Nathan and Brian said, because we have a new member of the Planning Commission here. This is part of the Trexler Business Center. That was originally a 17-acre site that was totally developed. All the public improvements are in place. We have water, we have the NPDS permit, the stormwater is in place, the detention ponds in place. We have access, we have a traffic light that was already installed. We're going to be completing the walkway pattern there. We have part of a walkway system along Hamilton Boulevard between Wawa and this project. We'll be completing that walkway system along Hamilton Boulevard. We'll be completing the walkway between the properties over to the Movie Tavern walkway system. We'll be completing the walkway pattern along Commercial Center Drive over to the bus stop that was constructed as part of the Trexler Business Center project. So, we're finishing up what's remaining of the property. This is a 1.3 acre portion of the property. It's the last unit within the planned commercial development. Going back, adding to what Nathan said too with the landscape plan, they actually have enhanced the landscaping even beyond what was showing. Raising Cane has a lot of emphasis on their landscaping. We will be sending another plan in that has even more of the perennials and the other landscaping around the building. They put a lot of emphasis on that. The screening wall, they have agreed that they will go to a similar screening wall to what Wawa has presented. All the deliveries, and we have notes on the plans already, that all deliveries will be made off hours. They don't want to conflict with traffic that's occurring when they're in operation. And we did talk about the cross access at the pre-application meeting. They were concerned about people from Trexler's Roadhouse coming over and parking in the lot. But since if the township wants that cross access, we will look at it. We want to try, we will provide it, but we're responsible per the original plan to construct it up to the property line. But we are going to look at trying to construct it in such a manner that it directs the people out the Commercial Center way and away from our parking lot area. So with that, I don't know, Michelle, do you want to add anything at this point?
Adam, who's on screen, could address your traffic questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Adam Karashi. I'm the Senior Property Development Manager for Raising Cane's for the East Coast. To address the concerns about the opening traffic, we will have a traffic mitigation plan. We have several restaurants opening in the coming weeks that are also new to market, and we've been working with off-duty police officers to put together traffic management plans working with those local jurisdictions to make sure that they're good with it. And then also working with the shopping centers in those instances as well to make sure that everyone is good with the queuing. We find that the honeymoon period, if you will, tends to be about 2 weeks. So the long lines should subside relatively quickly. And then this site is very well over queued for what a typical Pennsylvania restaurant does once it's settled in. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I did fail to mention is that Andrea and the ADA team is working on that rear Hamilton Boulevard side of the building and are looking at options for that. Andrea, do you want to say something about that now?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrea with ADA Architects. We are working on changing that rear view elevation to update the wire mesh that we presented first, so that it's showing spandrel glass. And I want to note that that's not a prototypical location. We're very well aware that Hamilton Boulevard will be our frontage and that it will be very prominent for the outside people that are not in the development. Also, we've added the signage, the tower to that elevation. So we hope that that will be enough to comply with your requirements.
So we expect to have something available to be submitting on Monday with our next submittal.
But you mentioned interconnection with some of the parking lot on Raising Cane with maybe other parking lots, in particular, the Texas Roadhouse. If you, first off, do you know, does Texas Roadhouse have a way to get out the rear of their parking lot onto that kind of loop road? They do not.
No.
So I guess my question is, if you can't make an interconnection with Texas Roadhouse, could you punch through with their approval out to the loop road so that at least there would be another way in and out of Texas Roadhouse?
Yeah, what was required as part of the original conditional use is that we construct something up to our property line, and then Texas Roadhouse would have to construct on their property. So we will look at providing what was required as part of the original plan.
But the connection would be intended to let them get out to that roadway.
Yeah, I think, and Maury could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the original intent was allow for a way for the Texas Roadhouse people to get out to the traffic light if there was problems
Yes.
for them getting, out at during times of day when traffic was heavy on Hamilton Boulevard. And some of that requirement was at the time before the bypass was constructed.
And I'm not really familiar with Raising Cane's. What, can you give us some more information about your restaurant, or maybe, what kind of your history of the company?
Adam, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Yep, Raising Cane's was founded in 1996 in Baton Rouge. Since then, we've grown to over 700 locations. We're on an aggressive push into the East Coast. Predominantly, we're in the South Central US and the West Coast. We do also have restaurants overseas in the Middle East. We are entirely corporately run, so this will not be a franchise restaurant. We only, as staff mentioned, only serve one thing, and that's the chicken finger meal. Only the variation is the number of chicken fingers that you get. We serve high quality, never frozen chicken fingers that are marinated in-house. They come with French fries, Texas toast, cold slaw, and that's it, really. We even only have two sauces, the cane sauce and a honey mustard, and there really are no substitutions. So that lends to our business model. And it hasn't been mentioned, but we can get people through our drive-through from the time they order to the time they leave in 2.5 minutes with a rate of about car leaving every 30 seconds. So we don't add to the menu. We don't plan to change the menu ever because then we're basically like everybody else. So it really is truly a very focused menu, and that's very intentional and will not change. Other than that, we're very pleased to be coming to your community and look forward to it.
The most recent one they opened was on Temple University campus. And so that was all the rage. They had students sleeping out overnight before everything opened up, and they had all these giveaways, and so it was on the news for a while. So I think some of the things he's talking about, the honeymoon period, will probably generate similar type of buzz. But I've never had any, so I'm looking forward to seeing what it's all about. Similar to your question.
What made you choose Lower Macungie specifically?
What made you choose Lower Macungie specifically, if there was a reason?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing.
So what made you choose our municipality? Was there something specific?
I'm not the real estate manager, so I can't address that question specifically, but I would think that it's, as Bud mentioned, the proximity to the bypass, the redevelopment that we've seen just this evening coming to the area, and the proximity to higher education are generally the things that we look for.
It was that, or it's the greatest place around.
There we go. There we go.
I think that was the other thing you were gonna say.
Yeah,
One answer is the win.
I think one of the other things that came up in our discussions here early on was, as I mentioned, that there was an approved plan for this site. And the building here is much smaller than everything that was approved. And the intent is this is something that they could get in here quickly. They would like to be in place this year yet. So we have to get going quickly. So that's the reason that, it helps that there was an approved plan. We're just modifying that plan, and they're willing to willing to comply with the township requirements to be able to get in and get moving as quickly as they can.
Great.
All right, sounds like let's open it up for public comment. I'm not sure if there's any public comment at this point. All right, sounds like we need to take action and table plan at this point. So is there a motion to table?
Make the motion to table.
Motion to table, is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries by a vote of 3-0, and we'll see you at an upcoming meeting.
Hopefully next month.
Next month, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Last item on the agenda is Planning Department report. Nate, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I just have one item that I wanted to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission. In particular, as everyone is aware, over the last several years, we've made significant progress on some of the stated and aspirational goals of our adopted official map. In particular, preservation or acquisition of lands for agricultural or open space preservation, the installation, which is currently underway, of the Sauerkraut Lane extension, and a couple of other items. So we would like to update the official map to reflect the essentially progress that we've made on all of those goals. Additionally to that, we've begun to identify future goals and future lots for potential acquisition, or open space, agriculture, parks and recreation, et cetera. What we want to do there is identify lots that would be of prime preservation status in one way or the other for the township, whether it's open space or whether it's agricultural. And also ones that would potentially, if developed, have impact on the township in terms of things like infrastructure, traffic, so on and so forth. So we want to begin that identification process. In fact, we've already begun it in-house, and at our next meeting, if the agenda allows, I would like to show a draft version of that map that is currently underway with CKS's GIS department right now with the Planning Commission. My recommendation to administration and the board with respect to this exercise this time around would be to give ourselves options and not zero in on individual, very particular lots, but look at a scope that's relatively wide that gives the township the ability to at least review as items come up on what would potentially be good lots for preservation, either for agricultural or open space preservation. Again, with a focus on items like traffic, stormwater, and the impacts should those be developed. And prime agricultural land or prime forested land where we wouldn't want to lose forestation. So the new map will show that, and it'll show a number of new lots, which shows that we're interested in playing the field, at least in terms of what options would be best for the municipality, the taxpayers, and for our continued preservation efforts. As everybody knows, our comprehensive plan, our Hamilton Boulevard corridor plan, and our zoning ordinance are all calling for smart infill redevelopment along Hamilton Boulevard and to try and slow sprawl into other areas of the township. So that's what you should look at moving forward. And I'd like to have that for you in June. But I wanted to first bring it to the Planning Commission to see if there are any suggestions that we could include, or potentially any concerns or reservations that we would want to avoid.
You know what might be helpful, Nate, if you could email us the current official map.
Yeah, I mean, it's up on our website, but I can certainly send the link. Yeah.
So maybe we can start taking a look at what's currently on the official map, and then for next meeting, be prepared to discuss additions to the official map. The official map is a planning tool, and it shows land that we're looking to preserve, or land for recreation, future roads, future trails. So that's how you should be viewing this. Where do we need trail connections? Where do we need more recreation land? Where do we need to preserve open space? Those are the things you should be paying attention to when you look at the official map.
We focused heavily at the inception of the official map on our greenway system, which is along the creeks. Updates after that included, and in partnership with Lehigh County, prime agricultural spaces, our recreation board and recreation areas where future parks could be located. And again, this time we're really looking at open space, forested area, prime agricultural area, and specifically lots that would have impacts with stormwater and traffic. So Brookside Country Club, which is part of the Brookside Fields at Brookside development, which is technically all development activity is at Brookside Country Club in Macungie Borough, not in Lower Macungie Township, needed to come before us specifically because traffic was coming in and out onto Willow Lane. So that makes us a party to the record plan, but also it makes us party to the record plan because the remainder and balance of the country club is going to have a preservation easement on it, which means that it will never get further developed for any reason into housing or the like. The status of that, Maury, is our understanding is the township solicitor's office is working with the applicant's attorney on amenable language for preservation easement that can be recorded once the plan is executed and to go record and to go for recordation. There's several different ways to go about preserving a golf course, but obviously given the nature of if it becomes instead of an 18 hole to a 9 hole, which I doubt is ever going to happen, they're trying to think of contingencies. And I know they're talking about the language. Mark, I don't know if you've had any further involvement with that, but I know that David's been working with their attorney closely on it.
Yeah, I think you had sent him some form language to look at, and we were waiting for them to get back to us with the, initial draft and comments on it.
What I'd like to do by the time we would adopt the new round would show that also as something that we've preserved, because that's a very big, that would be another big preservation for the township.
Okay, something to look forward to in June, in July.
Yeah, I think we'll just, as everybody knows, we're gonna keep rolling along with some of these regular meetings because the pipeline of projects does not seem to be slowing. We have projects that are tabled and we have new projects that we expect are also gonna come in. We are slowly but surely working on other items in the department, but right now I think our primary function is really processing these plans and getting them off the ground.
And in terms of a workshop next week, no workshop next week.
Yeah, given the project load that we have right now and recognizing how busy our planning commission members are, we do not anticipate a workshop next week. And then in the summer, obviously, with people going on vacation, it's also always very hard to ask you to come in for a second time in case you have any summer plans. So I don't anticipate any further workshops in the next couple of months.
Okay. Any other matters to come before the planning commission tonight? Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned at 8:31. Thank you very much. You had the chicken.
Thank you, everybody.